What is up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here, and this is the first review for Classic Albums Revisited. And before I get started with this, I know that I'm in my music room once again for the video and using my webcam, but I would like to say that it would be amazing and supportive if you guys would like to share this segment around to your friends and other music related YouTubers that make either album reviews or other music related content. And it has been one of my favorite segments since I've started it basically, and I think it deserves some more recognition and some new faces to get them interested for themselves. So it would be great if you would like to recommend this to many other YouTubers. Anyways, this is going to be the review on Low from David Bowie. David Bowie, everyone knows who David Bowie was. He was a rock, glam rock, art rock, experimental, funk musician and also producer. So Bowie has been one of the most interesting and profoundly unique musicians in popular music. Low is Bowie's 11th studio album, and it is the follow-up to the 1976 album Station to Station. And out of all of the albums that I've listened to from Bowie's discography, I always stick to Station to Station and the Berlin Trilogy that are my personal favourite eras from his career. Of course, he had made some other fantastic albums, like some of his previous stuff, like Hunky Dory, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, and the follow-up Aladdin Sane. But when it comes to the Berlin Trilogy and the Thin White Duke from Station to Station, I just somehow feel much more connected, I guess you could say, to that period from Bowie's career. So Low is my favourite David Bowie album out of all of his albums. I love Heroes and Station to Station. Low is the one that really stood out to me in terms of the vibe, the experience and atmosphere on this album. When it was released originally, it was hugely divided upon reviewers and fans alike. Some of the people had been giving this album some backlash. This is a huge step forward, in my opinion, than a step backwards. And when you listen to this album, it is a huge change of sound and pace. The background behind the album, unfortunately, it was not a very easy time for Bowie, because after the success of Station to Station, Bowie had been going through a pretty bad state of cocaine addiction. And from the first half of '76, Bowie and close friend of his, Iggy Pop, travelled to Switzerland, and then throughout the rest of '76 they moved to Berlin. And around that time, whilst living in an apartment together, Edgar from Tangerine Dream helped Bowie out along with Iggy to recover from his cocaine habits. And at the same time, Edgar was introducing him to many more bands in the German scene, including Tangerine Dream, Kraftwerk and Neu, and Bowie became so fascinated by that style of music, and he was also in love with Brian Eno's discreet music, and that is when eventually Bowie and Eno met and collaborated with the material that would become this album. The original title for the album was going to be called New Music Night and Day. This is an album that is really on a very experimental direction, because Bowie was much more beloved and well known for his rocky and in-your-face sound, like the Ziggy Stardust and Aladdin Sane albums. Low was pretty much focused on the art rock, electronic and some ambient instrumentation. So the first half of Low is more on the art rock side, whereas the second half, when you flip the record over, it is more on the instrumental, ambient, electronic side. Speed of Life, the opening track, is one of my favourite tracks on this album. Fades in with some of these noisy keyboards, and then the rest of the musicians just kick straight off with their steady beats to electric guitars and some more of that keyboard sound. And also the synthesizers were really prominent on most of the tracks on this album. So Speed of Life is the first instrumental piece. One of my other favorites on this album is What in the World, and this is where Iggy Pop does some backing vocals on this one too. Again, with some synthesizers, but with a lot of these crazy noises that are everywhere in this piece. Simplicity of some lead guitar playing on this one. It's one of those albums that is really much more concentrated on the instrumentation than the lyricism, because most of the lyrics, you may think to yourself that they're like either nonsensical and too basic, but there were some meanings behind some of the songs, like on the song Always Crashing in the Same Car, which is personally my favorite song on the entire album. And it is basically reflecting that Bowie and Pop were in Bowie's Mercedes driving, and Bowie spotted the drug dealer he thought he got mugged from. So Bowie eventually kept crashing and ramming into this drug dealer's car, and then afterwards Bowie drove to the hotel Pop and Bowie were staying at, and Bowie just drove all the way around in circles at the hotel. The vocals on this track is like a very tiring and quiet sounding voice, and I love the guitar solo on this one too, and with some swirling keyboard effects that is always in the background the entire piece of the song. A New Career in a New Town is another one of the best instrumentals on this album. It is more of an uplifting tune, and Bowie plays some harmonica on this one. It's got like a very memorable hook to it, and the landscapes on some of the material really suits its atmosphere, and you get to hear some of the singles like Sound and Vision, a bit of some funky guitar, the vocal harmonies from Bowie, and then the other single of Be My Wife. But the second half is really where the mood of the album gets even more downhearting, but beautiful at the same time. Wazawa, with some of those improvised, made up vocal performances with some backing vocals along with Bowie, and Eno's contributions on the instrumentation is simply stunning. An absolute classic instrumental. Weeping Wall is like a very trippy type of sound with, again, some dizzying keyboard sounds, but it has its own like imagination, I guess you could say. It comes from like a different vibe, and I don't know why I had to say it like that. That is another very strong piece. The Subterraneans, one of the beautiful closing tracks that I still admire to this very day, at least one of my top 10 closing tracks of all time. And this is where the mood of this piece is on a much more calmer and gentle pace. Again, like Wazawa, with these improvised vocal performances, but you get to hear some saxophone playing from Bowie himself in this one, and it takes things on a really slow and free landscape, and I just cherish it that much. I know I don't want to go on about all of the tracks on this album, but since a lot of you guys had heard about this album, why this is one of the best albums of all time, it's one of these records that doesn't really need to be said, like Ziggy Stardust and Station to Station, but I always will cite Low as the best Bowie album in his entire discography. The production from Tony Visconti is simply amazing. He was easily like the most beloved producer because he produced most of Bowie's albums since he decided to produce with him on his 1969 self-titled album, Bowie's second studio album. But other than that, Low is an album that is really adventurous, yet moody, just some sublime instrumentation, amazing musicianship, and it just feels like a huge artistic, creative freedom for Bowie himself. So that is really all I've got to say about Low from David Bowie. Let me know what you think of this album in the comments below, and I will be back to do more reviews in this segment and to do more of the usual stuff. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.